Venerable Sampt and I this weekend participated in the Veterans for Peace Convention down in Spokane. We led early meditation there at the hotel. And then on Friday afternoon, I was part of a 12-person inner circle with the theme of sacred lands, sacred lives, weaving our visions. And that was basically the theme of this year's convention. Sacred lands, sacred lives, peace knows no borders. And so I wanted to share my experience because it has had a very deep impact on me. I'm still actually processing it. I was there for the whole day, about 10 to 12 hours. And it was inspiring, it was moving, it was heartwarming, poignant, informative, and really quite sobering to spend time with the veterans from our Vietnam, our Gulf War, Afghani, and Iraqi wars there. Quite a few hundred people. I don't know how many, but a few hundred. The day was jam-packed with a lot of events and workshops, but from the very, very beginning, I had a very, very clear sense of their intention, that the focus of the gathering was them to be able to share, to learn, to connect, and to participate. It had that kind of energy as soon as I came into the hotel. So I knew nothing about Veterans for Peace, so I went to their website and to give some kind of context of this organization. So it is a global organization for military veterans and their allies whose collective efforts are to build a culture of peace by using their experiences, lifting their voices, and fulfilling their obligation to heal the wounds of war. We as military veterans, their statement of purpose says, do hereby affirm our greater responsibility to serve the cause of world peace. To this end, we will work with others both nationally and internationally. Number one, to increase public awareness of the true causes and costs of war. Number two, to restrain our governments from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations. Number three, to end the arms race and to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons. Number four, to seek justice for veterans and victims of war. And number five, to abolish war as an instrument of national policy. We talk about high motivation. To achieve these goals, we pledge to use nonviolent means and to maintain an organization that is both democratic and open, with the understanding that all members are trusted to act in the best interest of the group for the larger purpose of world peace. So this organization was founded in 1985 by 10 veterans who felt compelled to respond to the global nuclear arms race, and that was during the time when the U.S. was starting to get very much involved in Central America, intervening in Central America. And it grew to 8,000 members in over 120 chapters after the invasion of Iraq in 2003. They have chapters and associations all over the state, in every state, and they're also in Japan, England, and Vietnam, and Ireland. They hold a seat of an NGO organization permanently at the United Nations. They have membership that spans 70 years of service. They still have some from World War II now in their mid-late 90s that are still active members of the organization. They work actively to prevent the spread of militarism in our society, to change foreign policy from endless war to diplomacy, and to help our national leaders have a long-term vision of peace and justice. Their members believe that the most important component to ending war is to work for peace. So today their members, it's just to watch, just to look at what they actually do in the world is just so phenomenal. But their members today actively are engaged in campaigns to help bring a clear understanding of the cost of war. This is a huge piece for them. The power, the money, the wealth that people make on having wars. Much of their current work is focused on the endless global war on terror. Their projects support returning veterans. They are strongly intending to want to close the School of Americas, which is an institute put together by the Defense Department in Panama back in the late 50s. And now it's at Fort Benning, Georgia, that basically trains Latin American armies to terrorize their citizenry, basically. They want to close Guantanamo Bay. They oppose all drone warfare. And they want to counter military recruitment offices in schools, high schools, and colleges. So that's their current, among many, many other things. So to start off, my first experience of having this meditation at 7:30 with just two of the men. I think 7:30 was a little early for some of the men and women. They might have been having breakfast, but anyway, I was in this space with them. This set the entire tone for the day. I really found that I was stepping into quite an extraordinary experience. So there were only three of us. It was an hour. I did body scan, I did breathing meditation, and I did a meditation on forgiveness by Jack Kornfield, which is really quite beautiful. And they were absolutely silent and didn't move for that entire hour, these two gentlemen, maybe in their early 70s, late 60s. And so we ended up talking after the meditation. And one of them, this is the story he told that set the whole tone. He was a pilot in the military, and he didn't say whether it was in the Navy or the Air Force. And like most military pilots that leave the military, they're usually hired on by airlines. They're pretty experienced pilots. You can really see when you look at the history of some of the airline pilots for United and Delta and stuff, they tend to be, retired military people because of their experience. So he was hired on by United, based in Boston, which was a fairly small crew. They sometimes have these crews that live in major cities. So if there's anything that happens, they sort of tap into these crews for pilots, for attendants, and things like that. He was the pilot that flew Flight 175 into Boston on September 10th. And the next morning, due to some difficulty, some changes, one of his best friends was tapped to go on into the crew as a flight attendant onto Flight 175. That was the one that crashed into Tower number 2. So he was the pilot who brought the plane into Boston the night before. And he said, I have been working on forgiveness for years. 4 years. And he feels that he's finally getting there. Just a lovely man. So this was the opening of the morning. It's like, 8:30 in the morning. So then they had an opening gathering, which began with an invocation for some of the Spokane tribe of Indian elders. Now, it's very interesting as I participate in the workshops and have looked at their website and their literature. They have an extraordinary karmic connection with the native people of our country. There's something about the relationship. The chapters are very much involved. A lot of them were at Standing Rock. I mean, there's 562 Indian tribes in our country. Many of them living and having all sorts of environmental craziness and corporations and mining and uranium mines and nuclear testing, and just a lot of things happen within and outside the reservations. And a lot of these vets really stand in support of some of our Indian tribes who are trying to fight against some of these environmental degradations of their land and water. So they have a very strong karmic connection. And the Spokane chapter of Veterans for Peace is no exception. They have a very close connection to the Spokane tribe. So they had invited some of the elders to make prayers and do some invocations and to chant before the opening ceremonies. So some of the things that they said, that the tribe said, is that they make prayers that kindness becomes greater than hatred in the world, and that we need to grow that within ourselves and lead that call. And that for them, ensuring peace for humanity and for their tribes for 7 generations is how they envision the world. So they're one of the peoples of the world who really believe to whatever actions you're doing, how will it impact generations 7 beyond 7? Is what I'm doing going to ensure the next 7 generations will have an earth that is at peace and healthy? The ones outside of Spokane have been fighting a uranium mine that has been near them for decades, have been making uranium for military armaments, and that have poisoned the water, the land, and the air. Many of the tribe members now have cancer, some of them very rare forms of cancer. The mine is finally closing, but now they're trying to convince the EPA to deregulate their closure to not have to clean up their mess. And so luckily the tribe now has a lot of support from nonprofits to get this really brought forward and make sure that they clean up what they've done there. But in the meantime, they're having a lot of cancer happening in the tribe. So 2 of the members who have the cancer right now were part of this invocation. And then who steps forward next is Michael McPherson, who was the acting director of Veterans for Peace and is now stepping down. It's really amazing. One of the younger ones, maybe in his 40s, 50s. He served in the Gulf War. And he also has been part of the United for Peace and Justice, People's Organization for Progress. And to hear his unique perspective of the Veterans for Peace's power in the world. He said, we capitalize the F in for in the name Veterans for Peace because we want to embrace pro-peace rather than anti-war. He said that as veterans, we have a high status and privilege in our country. It was African American. He said, men first. And he said, you white men out there, not us black vets. We don't get as much, respect. But the fact that we're men, and many of us are white, that people respect and look up to us. And because of this status, he says the organization is powerful and dangerous to the present militarization of our government and our country, and is more than any other peace organization, and has the power to disrupt this whole war thinking because of who they are, and that they have a moral responsibility to do that. So this is Michael stepping down. He had been the director for 6 years. He called on them, and this was really amazing. He said, we are death dealers. We have either directly or indirectly supported the killing of others. And that we are all committed to transforming through our own thoughts and minds into the truth, forgiveness, and courage. We have a moral responsibility to undo what we have done. He was then replaced by this, who's now the new executive president or the executive director is Garrett Reppenhagen. He was in Kosovo. He served in the peacekeeping mission. He was in Iraq as an Army Scout sniper. And right after his honorable discharge in 2005, he began working for Iraq Vets Against the War. He has been totally involved in pro-peace movements since he stepped away from that, serving in Iraq. And this is his quote from his bio. This is the man who's going to lead this organization for who knows how long. He's maybe in his late 40s, early 50s. Community is strongest when we care for one another and open ourselves to the experiences and challenges of others. After all, what motivates our struggle for peace on our earth more than love for our fellow humans, our planet, and all living beings? This is the director of this organization. He's stepping into this with that kind of mind. So I have a lot to say. I might break this up into two BBCs. So I chose 2 workshops. They had the day planned with many workshops. One of them, which I wanted to share, but it's just so intense, it was called the Pentagon's Militarized Response to Climate Crisis. Sobering, horrifying, eye-opening. I don't know, I might do a BBC on it. The other one was PTSD and moral injury, paths to healing. And this really was so amazing to hear the difference between these 2 things, that the therapists, the people who have worked to heal the vets and what they've discovered through all of this trauma, is PTSD is things that happen to us, not just the military, but human beings and animals from the outside. So that's climate catastrophes, mass shootings, victims of violence, being refugees is one of the ways in which PTSD manifested itself. It's from what comes at us. And the people that were giving this workshop said this planet is heading for a crisis in just the level of PTSD because of the migrations, the climate crisis, the conflicts that are going on. We haven't seen anything yet, much less the vets. Moral injury, on the other hand, is what we do to others, what Michael McPherson said, the death dealing that the vets have done. what they've done in the military, violence, genocide. Last year was commemorated the 50th anniversary of the My Lai massacre. 508 Vietnamese villagers were slaughtered. So the moral injury really addresses, besides the PTSD, is what happens to them after they come home. The nightmares, when they have participated or supported or condoned the killing, mostly of civilians. War now is killing and destabilizing countries by killing the people. Forget about the military targets. It's the hospitals. It's the food sources, you know? So it's the guilt, the shame, the homelessness, the depression, the suicide, addictions, finding ways to come to grips with what they've done. And there are four things. They didn't get into it. There are some books that they had that I'm going to try to get. There are four things that seem to help the vets a lot. One is self-healing. So therapy, EMDR, very powerful. Tapping, a form of doing something with the brain centers. Counseling, medical care. There's a lot of amputees there, number of amputees. Service to others. Best thing to heal yourself is to extend oneself to the world, to help those who are less fortunate than you. Reconciliation. Many of the Vietnam vets have returned to Vietnam to ask for forgiveness. Same thing with some of the Iraqi vets. And never forgetting, remembering what one has done and heal through that. I think that's as far as I will go. And I have more and more of my lasting impressions personally. But it was a remarkable day, and I'm still processing, and I feel very honored to have been able to be part of it. So I'll share more tomorrow.